Under the buzzing lights of a desolate gas station, two officers decided to harass a lone black woman trucker. What they didn't know. Her truck wasn't just carrying cargo, it was recording their downfall. The air in dusty Sanderson County hangs thick with the smell of dry earth and impending rain. It was just after dusk when the deep crimson Kenworth W900 pulled into the Oasis Gas and Go, its engine a low, powerful heartbeat in the encroaching silence. The station was an island of harsh fluorescent light in a sea of darkness, its donuts sign flickering a desperate, buzzing rhythm. From the driver's seat, a figure descended with a poised, unyielding posture that belied the long hours on the road. This was Aria Vance. At 40, her face was framed by neat, shoulder-length locks, and her dark eyes were sharp and analytical, missing nothing. She wore a fitted Carhartt-style jacket over a simple gray t-shirt, her movements economical and precise as she stepped toward Pump 7. Nothing about her screamed for attention. She moved like a woman who was used to being watched, and had long ago decided not to care. But across the cracked asphalt lot, her very presence was an event. Inside a patrol car caked with a week's worth of dirt, Officer Miller nudged his partner. "Well, look what we have here," he said, a smirk spreading across his face. "A little lost, are we?" His partner, Officer Kane, a younger man with weary eyes, just sighed and took a sip of his lukewarm coffee. "Let it go, Miller. She's just getting fuel." Miller ignored him, his gaze fixed on Aria. He adjusted his duty belt, the leather creaking with a sense of self-importance. An out-of-state rig, a lone woman, something doesn't add up. He tossed his empty cup out the window. "Let's go make sure she feels welcome." Aria was swiping her payment card when their shadows fell over her. She looked up, her expression unreadable. No fear, no forced smile. Just a steady, patient gaze. "Evening, ma'am," Miller began, his voice dripping with condescending charm. He stopped a little too close, invading her space. "That's a whole lot of truck for for one person. You handle this big rig all by yourself, sweetheart." Aria slid her card back into her wallet. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and clear, cutting through the heavy night air. "I do." "Is there a problem, officers?" The word "sweetheart" hung between them, an insult dressed up as a pleasantry. Kane shifted his weight, a silent apology in his posture. Miller's smirk widened. He was enjoying this. He thought he was in control. "You tell me," Miller pressed on, leaning against the massive fuel tank of her truck as if he owned it. "Just seems unusual. We like to know who's passing through our town. Got any paperwork on that load you're hauling?" "I do," Aria said, her hands resting calmly at her sides. She didn't move an inch. "But I'm not on a public highway and I wasn't pulled over for a traffic violation. So, I don't believe you have a legal reason to ask for it." Miller's jaw tightened. The casual, almost instructional tone of her response grated on him. He wasn't used to being lectured, especially not by someone he had already dismissed. Kane looked from Miller to Aria, a flicker of unease in his eyes. This wasn't going the way these stops usually went. "I think I'll be the judge of what's legal," Miller snapped, his friendly facade dissolving. "Now, why don't you be a good girl and pop open that trailer for us? We just want a quick peek." Aria raised a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow. The air crackled. This was the moment. The pivot. She let the silence stretch, forcing them to feel the weight of their demand. Violation number 1, baseless stop, she catalogued in her mind. Violation number 2, verbal harassment with gendered and racial undertones. Violation number 3, attempting a search without probable cause. "Are you requesting a search of my vehicle based on a reasonable suspicion of criminal activity?" she asked. Her tone was clinical, as if she were posing a question in a classroom. "If so, I'd like you to articulate that suspicion for the record." "The record?" Miller laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "The only record here is the one I'm gonna write. Now open it, or I'll open it for you." He took a step toward the trailer's latch. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, officer," Aria said, her voice dropping into a lower, more serious register. "You might want to take a closer look at my mirrors before you touch that latch." Puzzled, Miller paused. He glanced at the massive side view mirror, then back at her. "What are you talking about?" Aria gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod toward the cab. Following her gaze, Miller squinted. There, nestled within the gleaming chrome trim, were 3 tiny, almost invisible lenses. As he watched, a discreet, pinprick of blue light pulsed on each one, like 3 cold, unblinking eyes. They weren't just on. They were active. Recording. A stunned silence fell over the 3 of them, broken only by the hum of the overhead lights. Miller's hand, which had been reaching for the trailer latch, froze mid-air. He blinked, as if trying to clear his vision, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. Kane saw it too. He took an involuntary step back, creating a small but significant distance between himself and his partner. His face, already pale under the gas station lights, lost another shade of color. This was wrong. This was very, very wrong. Before Miller could find his voice, a new sound joined the night's ambience, the whisper-quiet crunch of tires on gravel. A vehicle was approaching from the road, its headlights off. It wasn't slowing down so much as it was gliding, a predator closing in on its prey. A hulking, blacked-out Lincoln Navigator, with windows as dark and impenetrable as the night sky, rolled to a silent stop directly behind Aria's rig, boxing in the police cruiser. It sat there, engine purring, an imposing, monolithic presence. Miller's hand twitched instinctively toward his sidearm, but Kane's voice was a sharp hiss. "Miller, don't." The Navigator's passenger door opened with a soft, expensive-sounding click. A woman stepped out. She was tall and slender, dressed in a sharply tailored black suit. Her dark hair was cut in a severe, no-nonsense bob, and her expression was utterly neutral. She said nothing. She simply stood by the vehicle, hands clasped behind her back, her gaze sweeping over the scene with an air of absolute authority. This was Agent Diaz. The entire dynamic of the encounter shattered and reformed in an instant. The power, which Officer Miller thought he held so firmly, had not just slipped from his grasp, it had evaporated into thin air. He and Kane were no longer the authority figures questioning a lone trucker. They were 2 small-town cops caught in the high beams of something far bigger and more powerful than they could comprehend. Miller's bravado collapsed into a slack-jawed disbelief. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked from the stoic Agent Diaz to the impossibly calm Aria Vance, and for the first time, a seed of genuine fear began to sprout in his gut. Aria hadn't moved. She just watched them, her dark eyes reflecting the flashing donut sign, her expression holding a trace of something that looked almost like pity. The trap had been sprung. They hadn't just walked into it, they had swaggered. Who are you?" Kane finally stammered, his voice barely a whisper. He was looking at Aria, but the question was for the entire, unbelievable scene unfolding before him. Aria took a deliberate step forward, her boots crunching softly on the gritty pavement. The hunter had become the guide, ready to lead them through the wreckage of their own making. "Let me make this plain for you, officers," she said, her voice low but carrying an undeniable weight of command. "This truck, this stop, this entire location, it's been flagged, monitored, and recorded under federal authorization for the last 3 hours." She let that sink in before delivering the final blow. "Every word you've said since you left your vehicle has been entered into a federal record. Your body cameras, if you're even wearing them and have them turned on, are not the only ones rolling tonight." Miller flinched as if he'd been struck. "This is entrapment," he muttered, the accusation weak and desperate. "We didn't do anything." "You initiated a stop without cause," Aria countered, ticking off the points with cold precision. "You attempted a search without a warrant. You escalated the situation without provocation. And you made an assumption about me based on my race and my gender. The only thing you were entrapped by was your own prejudice. From beside the navigator, Agent Diaz began to walk toward them. She moved with a silent, fluid grace, holding a single manila envelope. She didn't look at Miller or Kane. Her focus was on the police cruiser. Without breaking her stride, she placed the envelope on the hood of their car. It landed with a soft but heavy thud that seemed to echo in the sudden stillness. On its surface, an embossed eagle, the federal seal, gleamed under the pale, buzzing lights. Diaz then returned to her vehicle, her part in the quiet drama complete. Kane stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. He looked back at Aria, his eyes wide with dawning horror. They'd heard rumors of federal stings, of internal affairs probes sweeping through departments like theirs, where complaints had a habit of disappearing. They just never thought it would happen here. Not to them. What is that? Miller asked, his voice trembling. A courtesy, Aria replied, her gaze unblinking. It's a formal notification for your precinct chief. You'll want him to read it before morning. She turned back toward her truck, the conversation now officially over. I have a long drive ahead, she said over her shoulder. But you'll be hearing from us. The next morning, the summons came. Report to the main conference room. 0800 sharp. No explanation. No friendly chat with the sergeant. Just a cold, direct order. When Miller and Kane walked in, the room felt like a meat locker. The air was stale, and the long mahogany table reflected the grim faces of the men and women already seated. Their chief was there, his face a mask of stone. No one offered coffee. At the head of the table sat two figures who did not belong. One was Agent Diaz from the night before. The other was a man in an equally severe suit, his file open before him. Agent Thorne. Miller's heart plummeted when he saw the small, high-definition camera mounted on a tripod in the corner of the room, its red light glowing steadily. A live feed. Time-stamped. Officers Miller and Kane, Agent Thorne said, his voice even and devoid of emotion. He didn't look up from his folder. Please, take a seat. The chairs scraped against the floor as they sat, the sound unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. Thorne finally raised his head. He gestured to a large monitor on the wall. We're not here to debate, he said. We're here for a preliminary review. What happens next depends entirely on your candor. He nodded to Diaz, who clicked a button on a laptop. The screen flickered to life. The image was crystal clear, shot from the perspective of Aria's truck. They saw themselves approaching, heard Miller's condescending opening line. Handle this big rig all by yourself, sweetheart. Miller's own voice, smug and demeaning, filled the dead silent room. A few of the other officers seated at the table shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet his eyes. The video continued, capturing every word, every escalating threat, every violation of policy. It played Miller's angry demand to search the trailer, followed by Aria's calm, precise dismantling of his authority. The camera angle was unflinching. It was undeniable. Thorne paused the video. Officer Miller, would you characterize this as standard procedure in your department? Miller opened his mouth, a protest forming on his lips, but Kane spoke first, his voice steady but strained. No, sir. All eyes turned to him. It wasn't. Kane looked directly at the federal agents, bypassing his own chief. We didn't know who she was. But that's not an excuse. We knew better. We thought no one was watching. Miles away, the crimson Kenworth rumbled down a sun-drenched highway, leaving Sanderson County far behind. Aria's job there was done. She was the one who placed the stone, she didn't need to stay to watch the ripples. By the end of the week, the ripples had become a tidal wave. A full-scale investigation was launched into the department. Kane cooperated fully, laying bare the unofficial patterns of profiling and intimidation that had become routine. Miller lawyered up, blaming protocol and claiming he felt threatened. But the video didn't lie, and for the first time, the chorus of previously ignored complaints from other drivers and residents found an audience that was finally listening. That night, Aria pulled into a quiet rest stop under a vast, star-filled sky. She stepped out of the cab and leaned against the warm grille of her truck. Reaching into her cab, she picked up a small, framed photo from her dashboard. It was a picture of a smiling young man in a crisp military uniform, her nephew, beaming with pride on the day of his graduation. The reason she did this job. The reason she never, ever blinked when a man full of misplaced authority tried to make her feel small. He served his country, and she served it her way, holding a different kind of line. A quiet sense of peace settled over her. The world didn't change overnight. But in one small, forgotten town, a badge might now mean protection instead of a threat. A trucker who looked like her might pull in for gas and not have to brace for a confrontation. Justice doesn't always arrive with sirens and flashing lights. Sometimes, it arrives in a crimson Kenworth, driven by a quiet woman who refuses to be moved. It arrives when someone turns the camera back on those who believe they are invisible. What you just witnessed wasn't just a traffic stop. It was a line in the sand. If you believe accountability is for everyone, regardless of the uniform they wear, share this story. Let's discuss this, and in the comments, let's show the world how to have a powerful conversation. Please, comment with respect for everyone's experience. Subscribe for more stories that matter. Because someone is always watching.